GoForThe2.com. We're into the Week 8 predictions of the college football season. Week number 7 was an amazing week. Week number 8 shaping up to be a solid week of college football. Let's get right into the predictions for this coming Saturday. Notre Dame travels to Tallahassee to face the number 2 ranked Florida State Seminoles. Should be a very interesting matchup. Both teams are undefeated, but when you look at Notre Dame right now, this is their first true road test. They played 2 games against Purdue and Syracuse on neutral field sites. Very lackluster in those victories, but now they travel to Tallahassee. Over the last 3 games, Notre Dame has committed 10 turnovers. That's not a good sign as they go on the road to Doak Campbell Stadium to face Florida State. When you look at the defense last week, surrendered 510 total yards to the North Carolina offense, and I think that the speed of North Carolina exposed some weaknesses in the Notre Dame secondary. I like Florida State in this matchup with or without Jameis Winston. When you look at Florida State in back-to-back victories over Syracuse and Wake Forest, they won the turnover battle. Defense seems to be coming along. Carlos Williams, the running back who was out last week, will be back for this matchup, and that secondary against Florida State matches up very well against William Fuller and those wideouts for Notre Dame. I think Florida State dominates in this matchup. I think it's a 35-20 victory for Florida State. I don't see Notre Dame challenging Florida State at this point in the season. I like what I see defensively out of Florida State heading up into this matchup, and I think Notre Dame, a little sloppy with the football, not playing the same type of game that they played in the first few weeks of the season, getting them a little erratic at this point in the season. So I like Florida State to dominate 35-20 heading up into this game. Georgia goes to the road to take on Arkansas. Georgia hitting on all cylinders defensively, held Missouri to 147 total yards, 5 turnovers, and 0 of 7 on third down conversions. They shut out Missouri for the first time since 2002. That's a very solid effort. You look at Nick Chubb on the opposite side of the ball. He carried the load for the Bulldogs with Todd Gurley out, 143 rushing yards, 31 more receiving yards for a total of 174 total yards of offense for the freshman. Did a solid job. They incorporated Brendan Douglas into the mix, but more importantly, they got wide receiver Malcolm Mitchell, who had 6 receptions for 27 yards, more involved in the offense. He came back 2 weeks ago, only had 1 reception for 11 yards. He got 6 receptions last week. I look for Mike Bobo to really utilize Malcolm Mitchell in the passing game this weekend in Little Rock. I think this is a dominant effort by Georgia. They have way too much offense, and the emergence of Malcolm Mitchell will help out Hudson Mason. I look for the Dogs to roll. I'm talking about a 34-21 victory over Arkansas. I'm not sold on Arkansas after almost upsetting Alabama emotionally. Where's this team going to be? Georgia's going to stuff the box. Quarterback Brandon Allen's going to have to beat the Bulldogs, and I'm not sold on Brandon Allen to beat Georgia in this matchup. I like Georgia's defense, and I think they're hitting at all cylinders. They're +9 in turnover margin, but more importantly, they're +7 in turnover margin on the road. So that's a key statistic as they face the Razorbacks in Little Rock. Let's talk about another matchup, Oklahoma K-State. On paper, it looks like K-State can challenge the Sooners in this matchup. Oklahoma's won 3 of the last 4 with an average margin of victory of 21 points per game. You look at Oklahoma's defense, +8 in turnover margins. In turnover margin, 16 sacks through 6 ball games, and their linebacker, Eric Stryker, very active. He leads the team in sacks with 4.5. They have speed off the edge. I think they could create a lot of problems in the secondary for Jake Waters. Jake Waters is a solid quarterback, completing about 65% of his passes, has 2 big play wide receivers in Tyler Lockett and Curry Sexton, but I like Oklahoma's secondary up against those wide receivers, and I think they create some issues for the Wildcats in Norman. Keith Ford's still not coming back for this game, but Perrine will run the football. I like the offensive line by Oklahoma. Trevor Knight, a little erratic, only completing 55% of his passes, but I think it's the offensive line that is the difference for Oklahoma in this matchup. I like OU to roll in this game, 47-24 over Kansas State. Rutgers goes to the Horseshoe to take on Ohio State. On paper, it looks like Ohio State should dominate. Over the last 3 games against Kent State, Cincinnati, And last 2 weeks ago against Maryland, Ohio State is dominated. They put up 66, 52, and 50 points on all three of those opponents. You look at JT Barrett, the redshirt freshman quarterback, has 17 touchdown passes on the year. 14 of those came in those three ball games. Offense was hitting on all cylinders, but when now they're coming off a bye week, both teams are coming off a bye week, and coaches will say that it always benefits teams because you get players healthy. I'm not so sure when an offense is hitting stride like Ohio State. This gives Rutgers an extra week to prepare defensively for JT Barrett, add some different wrinkles to that defense. This is a very active Scarlet Knight defensive front. They have 24 sacks through 6 ball games, only giving up 135 rushing yards per game. They're very solid in the defensive line, and I like Rutgers defensively to stop Ohio State and keep their offense and give them an opportunity to pull off the upset. It's going to hinge on quarterback Gary Nova. Will he be clean with the football? Been a little inconsistent this year, but in the victory at home against Michigan 2 weeks ago, did not turn the ball over. That's going to be a key statistic heading up into this matchup against Ohio State. I think Rutgers can challenge Ohio State vertically, can throw over the top of this defense, and they can be in the game from start to finish. Look out for running back Desmond Peoples. He's going to need a solid effort, but I think Rutgers is in a position to pull off the upset on Saturday. Whether they get it or not, I'm not so sure, but at this point, I think they'll be in a position to pull off the upset, calling for a 27-20 Ohio State victory at this point, but I wouldn't be shocked if Rutgers gets the upset over the Buckeyes in the Horseshoe this weekend. One more game that you have to keep an eye on, and I like very, very much. It's Alabama, Texas A&M. You look at the Crimson Tide, lackluster in 2 road games against Ole Miss and against Arkansas offensively. You look at 2 weeks ago against Ole Miss, only put up 228 passing yards against the Rebels when they were averaging 335 yards per game and only rushed for 168. They lost a turnover battle, and the game came down to a Blake Sims interception late in that ball game. They then go to the road in Fayetteville last week to take on Arkansas. They have the Razorbacks down and out early, but then can't finish. Arkansas comes back and really pushes Alabama to the limit in that matchup. You look at the Alabama offense in that game, only 227 total yards, only 66 yards of rushing offense for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Very lackluster, but the key lining and the key statistic in that matchup against Arkansas last week was that Alabama won the turnover battle for the first time all year. Secondary came up big with some interceptions. Landon Collins. Defense came up big with a turnover on the goal line early in the first quarter. And I think this is a key stat. They blocked an extra point that keyed that victory. Now they go back home and face a very tired Texas A&M team. You're talking about a Texas A&M team that 4 weeks ago had to play Arkansas down to the wire. They trailed 28-14, had a battle back in OT and win that game 35-28. They went on the road to Starkville the following week and got beat up by Mississippi State, and then they came back home and got beat up again by Ole Miss and a very physical offense and defensive lines. Now they have to go back on the road to Tuscaloosa, not an easy place to play, and play still a physical offense and defensive line. I think this is a worn-out Texas A&M team. I like Alabama at home. I like them to dominate, and when you look at Kenny Hill, the quarterback, 5 interceptions over the last 2 ball games. I like Alabama to run the football against Texas A&M at will. I think this is a dominant Bama victory, calling for a 41-17 victory over Texas A&M. I don't even think it's close. I think Texas A&M is tired, and I think Nick Saban and the crew take advantage. Alabama rolls at home. Stay with me all season long at GoForThe2.com and the Weekly Blitz. College football is great. I just love talking about it. Stay with me all year.